Hello there. This government is as woke and against free speech as it gets. Don't let them try to fool you into thinking otherwise. Well, the government is now taxing us at an almost record rate, but more importantly, taxing businesses into oblivion. It's hard to see how some of the smaller businesses can keep going now that corporation tax has been increased by over 30% from 19% to 25%. Right now, the government is bemoaning older workers taking the decision to retire early and take their pension now rather than paying punitive taxes just to turn up at the office every day. But maybe the government will soon start berating small business owners who decide that enough is enough and it's time to shutter their business. But now it gets worse for business, because a law that is going through Parliament right now would make an employer liable to pay compensation to any worker that is harassed by a third party, possibly a customer, while they're at work. This could turn workplaces into heavily censored areas, zones that are free of free speech. And here was me thinking the Tories were against all this stuff. Enforcing all this on businesses will do nothing to free up our economic potential. Now, when I first saw this in the papers, I thought it must be an April Fool's joke. But I checked on the government website and there it is, the Worker Protection Amendment of Equality Act 2010 bill. Now, this isn't a government bill, but they appear to be supporting it. Otherwise, how did it get through the Commons unamended and unstopped in the first place, and then into the Lords? It was actually a private member's bill, put forward predictably by two Lib Dem politicians, Vera Hobhouse MP and Baroness Burt of Solihull. And it went quietly through the final Commons process on Friday the 3rd of February and has already had its first reading in the House of Lords. Now, having taken a look at the bill itself, it appears to put the employer on the hook for anything that a third party, someone who is not the company employer or one of its employees, the employer is on the hook for anything a third party says to or within earshot of an employee that the employee doesn't like. And the employer must take reasonable care to protect the employee from such harassment. And I'm assuming this will also apply to telephone and other electronic communications. So if your job is monitoring the company social media pages, and this could become law within weeks, although the bill does stipulate that it won't take effect for 1 year. Now, the law of unintended consequence will flow strong from this if it gets through the Lords unscathed. From the very start, it puts another fine wedge between employer and employee, and puts employees in a difficult position. If anything does happen, they will understandably fear for their job. Or conversely, the unprincipled could use it for a cushy ride, knowing they could take their employer to tribunal for constructive dismissal if they were suddenly made redundant after making a complaint based on this new law, for example. The bill also does not seem to differentiate between the public and private sector. So the average police officer could end up with a hefty uplift in their salary, as would pub bar staff. And how about those like social workers, probation officers, job centre workers and prison warders, the armed forces and border force? And how about those that work in MPs' constituency offices in public-facing roles? Then there's those that work for Dominic Raab to consider. Anyway, employers will have a year to consider how to deal with this. More automated self-service, perhaps, funded by a reduction in headcount maybe, or preventing as many of their workers as possible from engaging with the public while they are at work. Now, this is all about employers and employees, so it presumably does not apply to the self-employed or to contractors. So anyone who works for the BBC as a contractor, earning huge amounts of money to present football shows, for example, won't be protected. Unless they suddenly claim to be employed, of course. Anyway, we might not need to consider that soon, as I believe Gary Lineker has hinted that he's on the way out, and that his days of hosting Match of the Day are coming to a close. "I'm ancient, my time is nearly up," he said on a Match of the Day podcast. Anyway, back to point. There also seems to be no mechanism in the bill for the employer to recoup the loss they make in any payout to an employee from the third party who caused it. And I point this out because if what was said or done was so awful, surely the person who said or did it is the culpable party. I can see much woke fun emanating from this bill going forwards, unless the government gets a grip and ditches it. While the government goes pedal to the metal for net zero, we now learn that the mileage claims made by electric vehicle manufacturers are a tad on the optimistic side. In fact, they come out about 20% more optimistic than the reality after the consumer group Which tested them. And the reason is that the official tests are not representative of the real road driving that Which subjected them to. But worse, Which also claims that on average, an electric vehicle consumes 15% more electricity than advertised to get it to a full charge. That makes them 15% more expensive to charge before you even get your 20% shaved off the advertised range. But not even that. Increased EV use could potentially lead to fewer parking spaces, because due to the weight of the battery, they are far heavier than internal combustion engine vehicles. And this has led to concerns about the safety of multi-storey car parks for EV use. And there may be other concerns, like old bridges and the like. And then there are ferries. EVs do like to occasionally self-combust. Wouldn't want to see that at sea, would you? But all those concerns could be overcome given time and money, no doubt. Now let's talk about EV energy security, shall we? One of the arguments used for going all electric is that it will wean us, both the UK and the EU, off of petrol and diesel supplied by potentially untrustworthy dictatorships. But Europe does not have enough lithium to build the number of batteries required by 2030. This is according to Benchmark Mineral Intelligence, as reported in the Financial Times. And the figures are that Europe will need to up lithium mining to 550,000 tonnes a year by 2030. But we will only be able to muster 200,000 tonnes. And the world's biggest lithium producer, Albemarle, has shelved plans for European lithium as it is not commercially viable. Low quality and small quantity, they say. But have you seen what it takes in terms of energy and ecological destruction to get that lithium out of the ground? Mind-boggling. So we'll now be reliant on the likes of China for lithium. You just cannot make this stuff up. But UK governments, both red and blue, will continue to bring in laws to force us out of our petrol and diesel vehicles and so be more reliant on despotic regimes than ever before. So it appears to me that our politicians have misread the situation. They seem intent on leading the UK into net zero energy.